Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Mike Downer, and I'd like you to welcome you to the Integrator Arena Podcast with Brian Wirtz. Brian is a retired Marine who has transitioned from entrepreneurial in the entrepreneurial world as a fractional integrator for companies using the EOS. Brian now helps others do the same. How are we doing today, Brian?
Doing great, Mike. I'll always love these conversations.
Me too. I'm learning a lot, and I think you're making me smarter, which I wasn't sure was possible at my age.
Always. No, you're doing great, Mike, and I love it. There's no end in sight to what we can learn, right?
Exactly. Today we're going to be talking about the integrator imperatives. So, Brian, up to this point, we've talked about understanding the role, where integrators come from, and how they develop. At some point, that shifts from understanding into the execution. Can you tell me what you think about the transition?
Yeah, I think there's a shift that has to go from understanding when we shift from understanding to execution. Really, what we're talking about is going from knowing to operating, right? I think we've all experienced this. We read something and it intuitively like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Cooking is a great example, right? We can read a recipe or fighting even, we could read a technique on how to fight, but there's a big difference between reading about cooking and actually cooking and getting the result, or reading about a fighting technique, and those are just two things that come to mind. But like anything that takes practice and repetition and effectiveness, there's a transition that goes from knowing to doing. And so that's what we need to do, is how do we go from knowing to operating?
Perfect. So you use the term integrator imperatives. How should people think about those, and how do they relate to how you approach developing integrators at W3?
That's a great question. So, again, I'm the only integrators that I'm developing out there in the world are the W3 integrators. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to reverse engineer things that have either worked for me or worked for other people, worked or not worked. So this is based on both positive and negative examples for folks that I know. And so I came up with this list. I've edited it a couple times, kind of grown, shrunk. But basically, I've got these categories of imperatives that are mindset imperatives. How are we thinking about the work we're doing? EQ and relationship imperatives. How do we show up? And operational and execution imperatives. What do we do? Right. And so, if we think about, mindset, relationships, and execution, it really helps us. It gives us a grounding of what we can do to show up every day, every week, every time we're operating with our clients or our companies to deliver in a consistent and effective manner that's also happens to be aligned to best practices.
Makes perfect sense. And where did these come from for you?
So I'll admit it came from a frustration of mine. So it started with one imperative, and I call one of my execution imperatives is coaches of the clock, right? Because integrators, in EOS companies, meetings are supposed to start on time, stop on time, follow a set agenda. And we want to come out with some tangible stuff at the end. That's why we call it a level 10. We're supposed to earn a 10, that's the goal, is we want to have these great meetings. And if you take that, just that concept of a meeting starting on time and stopping on time, and having a set agenda, that is tied to a clock, right? That's tied to a specific meeting. It's tied to a specific purpose. And an integrator, being the heartbeat, the drumbeat of the organization, they should be the one that's helping to make sure things are starting on time and stopping on time. And it's not just done through one action; it's done through many actions. It's a maintenance. It's a time management system that goes across the entire organization. And so, for the integrator, it's not just being somebody that is on time themselves, that knows how to start and stop a meeting. It is somebody that knows how to help other people be timely, how to help other people manage their time. So coaching of the clock is helping to transition this concept from being good at it yourself. As soon as a meeting is mentioned, we're getting into scheduling and delivering an invite, all the way to when the meeting is being conducted. We have our eye on the time, and we have our eye on the objectives of the meeting. And if conversation gets too long in one part of the meeting, we're already thinking about, how am I going to get the objectives of this meeting met in time that we have allotted. So a coach of the clock is always managing that. So I saw integrators that didn't have that skill or were not exhibiting that skill. And to me, that was something that I was seeing enough of it where I have integrators running long and I need to help them become more effective. So I came up with we really need to be coaches of the clock. And that was just the beginning of my brainstorming of all these other things that fit into those other three categories. But that's where it stemmed from, is like, hey, let's get good at time management. And then, there's other things we should also be pretty good at.
So what have you seen over time that led you to define them this way?
So what I've seen over time are things that have worked for me and not worked for me. Some things have been clients or companies I've worked with saying, Brian, we really like your approach to this. I think I'm pretty good with managing people, with coaching and developing people. So I put some of those, and I think I also bring a good frame of reference to the work I do. So I put some of those into the mindset and relationship imperatives. I also have seen integrators that try to bring their own pet projects into companies. Literally, in one case, a pet project where a brand new integrator came in and suggested that the company who've never had animals in the office create a puppy policy, right? Like, you're a brand new integrator and that's your focus, is creating a puppy policy? I don't think so. So that led me to it's not about us. We're the integrator. We're there to help the company and the visionary and the vision come to life, right? The visionary succeed, the vision come to life. That's what an integrator does. The integrator is not there to come up with puppy policies, at least not outside of the right context, right? Which would be during a planning meeting, and it should be solving something that the company needs. So it's not about us. So I'm not going to go through all the imperatives right now, but those are a couple examples of where they've come from. Either things that worked for me or things that frankly didn't work. And I think it's important to call out as well.
Okay, Brian. So just to be clear, are these the only way to succeed in the role, or are they specific to how you think about developing strong integrators?
No, absolutely not the only way. So I look at it this way, I'm developing W3, the Integrator Arena, is a training and development company. I'm going to teach people to be successful in a way that has worked for me and makes sense to me. It's clearly not the only way to be successful as an integrator. There's a lot of opportunities out there. There's other folks that do training and development. I do believe that I know how to create winning integrators. And so what I'm going to do is just reverse engineer what's worked for me, teach what's worked for me, share the lessons learned that I've either experienced myself or observed. But if someone else can teach it another way and help other integrators be successful, that's great. What I can guarantee is somebody, if they make it all the way up through proficient, expert level W3 integrator, they are going to be as solid as you can imagine out there. And anywhere along the spectrum, you're going to have a strong integrator showing up if they've been developed by W3.
Great answer. So how are imperatives different from things like best practices and leadership principles?
It's a great question. So when we talk about best practices, typically we're talking about proven methods to execute a certain thing within the business, right? Some of the imperatives could certainly be best practices, but they're really about mindsets and approaches. and the integrator imperatives. I've worked in companies that have had like the 7 deadly sins or the 6 best things, the 6 things we want everyone to do. Those differ a little than, say, core values, right? Which are core to who we are and how we think and how we operate. Best practices are, what's the most effective way to handle this particular task or this kind of part of a meeting? That could be a best practice. But the imperatives are about how we show up, how we think, how we execute in a consistent manner. And so they're really about us as integrators being the best we can be, right? Whereas, some of those other things apply more organizationally. This is really inward focus. Like, how can you show up in the best possible manner?
Perfect. So why is it important to think about these as non-negotiables rather than just preferences?
Well, again, this is a W3 concept and not so it could certainly be negotiable for integrators outside of W3. But the way I look at it is, think of these as things that if you want to be most effective in the role, you should embrace them, right? You should embrace these imperatives. And I'm a progress, not perfection sort of guy. Some of these I still struggle with. They're my imperatives, but I'm not like batting, I'm not perfect at them by any means. But what I do expect is that I'm going to keep making myself better across these. And if somebody's going to work within my ecosystem, they're going to keep pushing themselves to get better across these. So the reason I created them was a bit of a coaching framework to help people realize you might be pretty decent at the job, but there's a lot of ways you can keep growing. And these are a framework to keep pushing yourself as an integrator to get better. So that's the purpose of the imperatives. So no, they're not optional. They are essential. And if you can't embrace them, then there's other places where you can be an integrator besides W3. But I want you to recognize that there is value in taking these on board and becoming the best integrator you can be.
Great answer. So Brian, when you look at the role through this lens, what does it change about how someone approaches being an integrator?
I think the change would be, and this is even a little bit of an evolution of from some of the conversations we've had in previous episodes. The change is really internalizing your own behaviors and putting a lens on not just developing the skill and the competency to do the job, to understand the accountabilities. It's looking inward at how I show up and how I focus on my relationships with the company, with the leadership team members, with the visionary. It's how I build these relationships and grow these relationships that is going to be my key to success. So that's the difference. It's that inward lens, that inward focus to which allows us to really, I think, clearly define what that roadmap going forward should look like.
So that kind of leads me to my next question for you, Brian. Why do you think some integrators understand the role, but still struggle to execute it consistently?
Yeah, I think the role is written very simply and makes a lot of sense. So it's actually, I believe, fairly easy to understand what the integrator is supposed to do. I think part of the reason many people struggle is they lean on what they know and not what may be proven as successful methods or learning from other people that have made mistakes. And so they might be likely to enter those same traps. And, if you've only ever run an L10 in your company, it's really easy to think, you know what? I read the book. I know what an L10 is supposed to look like. I can read an agenda. I can figure it out. And and you don't have any data points outside of the L10s you've run, you frankly don't necessarily know how strong of a meeting you're running. There's a chance you might be running one of the best meetings there's ever been, but the likelihood of that being the case without having gotten outside input and feedback is probably not strong. So I think integrators that would tend to just be focused on what they see and feel themselves and not necessarily looking for outside input, maybe they're as strong as they can be, but a lot of times they're not. And so what we're doing is we're trying to widen the lens, bring a view that incorporates a lot of experience from a lot of different organizations and help everyone grow based on that.
Oh, makes sense. So Brian, let me ask you this. Where do you see the biggest gaps between what people actually know and how they actually operate day to day?
So well, that's a good one. What do people actually know and how do they operate day to day? I would say knowing is a first step. And what happens is when you know an answer, but you don't always have the right techniques or the right framework to handle a tough situation, especially if it involves a tough conversation. The way you deal with that day to day may be more triggered by emotion, maybe more triggered by what feels right in the moment, rather than actually, figuring out what's best for the organization or can get us to a win. So one of the imperatives is, savvy over surly, right? So savvy over surly is about conversations, right? Sometimes in organizations, heated discussions can happen, and a surly response might be the response that feels good, right? Like you said that to me. Well, this is what I got for you right back, but is that serving the organization, especially when you're the integrator, right? Might be with the visionary. If the visionary is attacking in an attacking mode, which sometimes they can be, does it really serve your best interests to hit back, right? Or to attack back? Or is there a more savvy approach that you can take? So the difference between knowing and really operating at a high level is, are you thinking through organizationally what's going to lead us to a better outcome? So a savvy response is probably going to help you in a much more long-term manner than just saying what feels good in the moment, right?
I get it. So even though this might seem like an obvious question, because you honestly have done an excellent job of answering everything that I've asked you, but just to kind of bring the point home, why is discipline such a critical factor in this role? I mean, like, again, it seems obvious, but you tell us why discipline is such a critical factor.
Whether we're talking savvy over surly, again, what feels right could be that surly response, but it probably takes a little bit of discipline to take that momentary pause, take a deep breath, and realize, oh, if I go there, I'm just gonna be adding fuel to the fire. Sometimes it's easy to let conversation in a meeting get out of control, right? And not be a coach of the clock and not make sure that we're going to meet our end state by the end of the meeting. But then when you get to the end of the meeting and we realize we just talked for all this time and didn't get done what we needed to do, or we don't have any actionable objectives, then we're going to feel like we wasted that time and we're still not haven't accomplished what we set out to accomplish. So discipline means we step in and we take the hard action, and we keep ourselves and we keep the team on track so that we're continuing to make that traction that keeps things moving forward.
Oh, that makes completely sense. So when someone does commit to operating this way, what tends to change for them?
I think, again, these disciplines, they're about our mindset, they're about our relationships, and they're about how we operate. So when we can focus on these imperatives and keep our mindset straight we're not getting emotional about things that may sometimes feel personal. It allows us to look at things at a higher level. When we focus on relationships, we're likely to get more out of other people, right? And we're likely to help them unlock their own growth. And when we focus on operating in a consistent and effective manner, we're going to be more consistent at achieving the objectives that we're setting out to achieve in terms of realizing what is written on the VTO, right? Like that's the greater the good of the organization. So that's what happens when someone truly commits to this.
Perfect. So as always, we will change the names to protect the innocent. So, but can you give me an example of an integrator who understood the role really well, but just wasn't operating at the correct level?
Yeah, so I've seen this on a few occasions. A lot of times, one of the whether I call it savvy, not being surly rather than savvy. I've sometimes visionaries can say some pretty harsh things, right? Like these are oftentimes very successful founders. They've accomplished a lot. They have high expectations, and oftentimes, particularly early in an EOS journey, sometimes they feel disappointed by others around them. They feel disappointed by their integrator, and sometimes they'll say some pretty cruel things. And I've seen integrators take that personally, and I've seen integrators not try to ground it by using some of the tools they have to foster mutual respect, but I've seen integrators respond in kind to cruel things said to them. They just fire right back. And one particular integrator I know did that on a few occasions, and things just continued to escalate. And while there was more productive visionary integrator collaboration, eventually that was a relationship that didn't work out. Probably wasn't a good fit from either side, but getting into a shooting match with your visionary is probably not going to end in your favor, right? So a savvy approach to that would be to focus more on how can you help a visionary coach to a better place? Can you be their partner to help them and the organization evolve in a way where you can be aligned and you're using the tools that EOS has and that the rocket fuel community have, like something like I'm going to throw a tool out here that they teach in the Rocket Fuel 101. It's designed to have great same page meetings with your visionary. It's a power index where it really drives some very effective conversations. A good integrator is going to focus on using their tools and taking the emotion out of the charged discussion so that we can figure out, can we get to an alignment, or is maybe this not a situation that's not going to work, but we don't have to turn it into a shooting match to come to that determination.
So after we've gone with that, I need to ask you, have you ever seen someone shift how they operate and see a noticeable difference in their effectiveness?
Yes. And I will say specifically, somebody that I've worked with, presenting them with these imperatives I've known a few people that have these imperatives have really been impactful for them. Things like, it's not about us, right? Like, not because anybody had ulterior motives with trying to bring their own ideas to the table, but sometimes I know an integrator that didn't realize the impact of and we should also do this. Like that, and we should also do this can be a big distraction for an organization. And the integrators actually working against their own best interests. So I've seen these imperatives help them realize it's not about us means I'm not always trying to add one more thing. Or coaches of the clock has helped integrators realize, wait a second, I'm the one talking right now, and I should be driving us to a conclusion. I need to be more disciplined in my talking, So yes, these can definitely have an impact.
Perfect. So, Brian, let me ask you, what does it look like when an integrator is consistently operating at a high level?
Well, so they're going to be having a lot of success with their visionary. They're gonna have strong same page meetings. They're going to be staying on the same page, but having tough discussions. They're going to be having strong leadership team members that are growing and successful in delivering in their rocks, but still seeking growth and development. They're going to see organizational successes, not perfect, but they're going to be starting to hit 80% success on rock completion and data completion, hitting their scorecard metrics every week. So things are going to start to consistently look better. They're going to have a solid solve rate. They're going to be working through issues effectively, having a good L10 meeting. And every week they're going to be solving 5 to 15 issues and coming up with solid to-dos and keep the velocity of the organization moving forward.
Perfect. So to wind this up, for someone listening to this and realizing there may be a gap between what they know and how they operate, let's wind this up. What is your advice on what would you encourage them to focus on first?
Well, I would say look at this list. Obviously, so this is something that's part of my curriculum inside the Integrator Arena community. But within the list, I would just take a good hard look and say, do a self-assessment. Where am I strong here? How can I leverage these strengths? But also, do I have any areas where this actually feels like, oh, this might be tough for me, or where do I naturally tend? What do I naturally tend to avoid or drift away from? I would look at those, determine, is this an area I'm willing to and able to improve? And if so, I'd look at, okay, well, what are some simple things I can do to improve? The thing I tried to do with these imperatives is not make them unachievable, but make them very user friendly, so you can just quickly get a sense of like, this is something I could do to make myself better, and I should. So it would really just be at a self-assessment, figure out where you can grow, and then start working on those areas.
Perfect. That was an excellent answer. Once again, Brian, I've learned a lot, as I do every time that you and I speak, and I look forward to our next session because I know we have a lot more to go over.
Thanks, Mike. Likewise, and enjoy every one of these conversations.
Thanks, Brian. Have a terrific day. We'll talk to you soon.